Egg shortage, Finland denies U.S. request, and the reason might shock you. Let's dive in. Intro. All right, let's dive in. Here's what we're talking about today. Imagine this. The United States, a global superpower, is begging Finland, a country smaller than Minnesota, for eggs. And Finland just said no. It sounds absurd, but it's real news. With the U.S. facing egg shortages and soaring prices, it looked to Finland for supply. But Finland refused. But Finland's refusal isn't just about eggs. It exposes something deeper, how fragile America's food system really is. If a single avian flu outbreak can cause this much havoc, what does that say about our long-term food security? This week, Finland, a nation of just 5.5 million people and a modest poultry industry, turned down that request, leaving America's egg crisis unscrambled and sparking a firestorm of questions. Egg prices here have spiked to $6 a dozen, some say $8 in parts of the Midwest, and shelves in states like Ohio and Texas are sitting empty as Easter looms just weeks away. The Biden administration, facing heat over food shortages, thought a quick call to a Nordic ally might crack the problem open. But Finland said no, and now the clock's ticking. Wholesale prices are volatile, and analysts predict a 15% jump by summer if supply doesn't stabilize. So what's really going on here? Is this a fleeting trade hiccup or a glaring red flag about America's food security? Let's set the scene. The U.S. has been reeling from an avian flu outbreak that's wiped out over 35 million laying hens since January, more than 10% of our egg-laying flock, according to the USDA. That's millions of breakfasts, cakes, and omelets suddenly up in the air. Meanwhile, Finland's refusal isn't just a random snub. It's a calculated move from a country prioritizing its own people over Uncle Sam's pantry. Their Poultry Association pointed to tight domestic supply. 4 million hens can only lay so many eggs, and no formal export deal with the U.S. ever existed. This isn't a blockbuster crisis yet, but it's got people talking, from grocery shoppers to policymakers. Headlines are buzzing. Reuters calls it a supply chain snag, while farmers on X are fuming. Why are we begging foreigners for eggs we should grow ourselves? It's a messy mix of economics, pride, and practicality, all hitting at a time when trust in global systems feels shakier than ever. So here's the hook. This isn't just about a few missing cartons. It's a pressure cooker moment that forces us to ask hard questions. Should the U.S. double down on self-sufficiency, ramping up farms and cutting red tape to keep our plates full? Or is global trade still the smarter play, leaning on allies like Finland to smooth out the bumps, even if they don't always say yes? Maybe it's both. Or neither. The stakes are real. Economically, we're talking billions in poultry losses. Socially, for families living paycheck to paycheck, this isn't just an inconvenience. It's a question of whether breakfast gets skipped or if that Easter egg hunt happens at all. Politically, it's fuel for debates about independence versus interdependence. And with Easter demand peaking soon, think egg hunts and died dozens. This couldn't hit at a worse time. Here's the key question to wrestle with. If the U.S. can't even secure eggs from an ally, what does that say about our trade policies? Should we take a hard turn toward food independence, or are we doomed to rely on foreign markets even when they say no? Let me know your take. Let's break it down from all sides, because this egg story's shell is tougher than it looks. Setting the stage. Context matters. Before we get into the details, let's set the stage. Here's the background you need to know. To grasp why Finland just turned down a U.S. request for egg exports, we need to unpack the layers of this story, starting with the crisis driving America's plea and the realities shaping Finland's response. As of March 16, 2025, the United States is grappling with a severe egg shortage sparked by an unrelenting wave of avian influenza that's decimated its poultry industry. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, over 35 million birds, many of them egg-laying hens, were culled in the first 2 months of 2025 alone due to bird flu outbreaks. This comes on top of a staggering 127 million birds lost since 2022, slashing domestic egg production by roughly 10%. Wholesale egg prices hit a record $8 per dozen in early March, though they've eased slightly to $6 per trading economics. Retail shelves are thinning and consumers are feeling the pinch, some groceries even rationing cartons as prices climb. This isn't a new problem. Avian flu has plagued U.S. flocks for years, but 2025's surge has pushed the system to a breaking point. The Biden administration, facing public frustration and economic pressure, turned to Europe for a lifeline, reaching out to countries like Denmark, Sweden, the Netherlands, and Finland. The hope? Temporary imports to bridge the gap while American farmers rebuild, a process that takes months as hens don't mature overnight. Enter Finland, a small Nordic nation known for its self-sufficient egg industry. On March 16, Yale News reported that the Finnish Poultry Association, led by Vera Lehtila, received the U.S. request but declined. Why? Finland's 4 million laying hens produce just enough to meet domestic demand. No surplus exists for export. Lehtila noted that even if they could spare some, it wouldn't solve America's massive shortage. Historical context deepens the picture. Finland's egg sector operates under strict European Union regulations, no salmonella, cage-free standards, and no egg washing, unlike U.S. norms, making exports to America a logistical nightmare. No market access agreements exist with the U.S., and negotiating one involves inspections and years of red tape, as Lehtila told Yale. The U.S. has deals with Canada and the Netherlands, but Finland's never been on that list. Meanwhile, Europe isn't flush with eggs either. Bird flu hit there too, culling millions of birds in 2022 and demands outpacing supply globally per AgriWatch. Finland's refusal isn't unique. Sweden's Kronag told Aftonbladet that export restrictions and local needs make U.S. shipments unlikely. This isn't just about eggs. It's about whether different global food systems can actually work together when crises hit. And right now, the answer isn't so clear. Mainstream takes, like Reuters, frame this as a practical trade hiccup. Supply chains stretched thin, no quick fix. But alternative voices on X and in forums see a bigger story. U.S. policy failures, from tariff threats under Trump to decades of outsourcing food production, leaving the nation vulnerable. Finnish headlines echo pragmatism. We're too small to help, while American farmers vent online about regulatory shackles hobbling recovery. Official statements like the USDA's outreach letters confirm the desperation, but Finland's draft response with its food authority underscores a stark truth: no deal, no dice. This isn't just about eggs. It's a collision of national priorities, global crises, and the limits of trade in a pinch. Let's analyze and consider different perspectives. Finland's rejection of the U.S. egg request isn't just about poultry, it's a flashpoint for bigger debates about trade, policy, and power. Let's unpack the key arguments from 3 angles: the progressive push for global cooperation, the conservative call for self-reliance, and the pragmatic search for balance. Each has merits, so let's dig in. 1. The liberal/progressive view: international cooperation and government responsibility. For progressives, this is a textbook case of why global trade and alliances matter. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization reports that international food trade cuts consumer costs by an average of 20% worldwide. Think cheaper eggs, milk, and bread. When avian flu guts U.S. production, imports from places like Finland could stabilize prices and shelves. Finland's no doesn't disprove this. It shows we need stronger, not weaker, partnerships. Experts like Dr. Maria Torres from the Center for Global Development argue that food security isn't just about growing everything at home. It's about a resilient network of allies. Sustainability is a factor too. Over-relying on domestic farms could mean more land use, water strain, and emissions, clashing with climate goals. Look at the EU's Common Agricultural Policy. It balances local production with cross-border support, keeping prices steady even in lean years. Progressives say the Biden admin should double down here, negotiate formal export deals, not just send last-minute SOS calls. The critique: U.S. trade policies like sporadic tariffs have soured relations, making allies like Finland hesitant. Cooperation's the fix, not isolation. 2. Conservative/libertarian view: national self-sufficiency and free markets. On the flip side, conservatives and libertarians see Finland's refusal as a blaring alarm. America is too dependent on outsiders. The U.S. egg-laying flock is down 10% since 2023, 127 million hens to 300 million per USDA stats, thanks to bird flu and what critics call overregulation. The American Farm Bureau's Ted McKinney says it plain: we've got the land, the farmers, and the know-how. Why are we begging Finland? Their fix/red tape. Think FDA rules on co-op sizes or vaccine approvals, and let free markets rebuild supply. Look at 2018, when tariffs protected U.S. steel, production spiked 8% in a year. Apply that to eggs, and conservatives say we'd be cracking our own surpluses, not groveling overseas. Finland's no proves allies won't always save us, especially with Trump-era trade spats still echoing. The long game? Self-sufficiency cuts risks in a crisis, keeps jobs here, and dodges foreign price gouging. Critics counter that going solo could spike costs short-term, but the rebuttal's simple: freedom's worth it. 3. Independent/pragmatic view. Balancing global trade with domestic resilience. Then there's the middle ground, neither full-on globalism nor fortress America, just pragmatism. Finland's 4 million hens can't plug our gap. U.S. demand hit 8 billion dozen eggs in 2024 per AgriWatch. Their refusal makes sense. EU rules prioritize local stability, and NATO ties don't mean freebies, but independents say both sides miss the mark. Liberals ignore how trade fails when allies pull back. Look at COVID mask shortages in 2020. Conservatives oversimplify too. Rebuilding 35 million dead hens takes years, not months, and costs billions. The fix? Dual track it. Boost domestic output, say 5% yearly growth via tax breaks, while locking in reliable trade pacts. Canada's a model, 90% self-sufficient in eggs, yet still trades with U.S. Geopolitics matters too. Finland's eyeing EU cohesion over U.S. pleas, especially post-Ukraine war. Pragmatists argue we've got to play both games: grow at home, deal abroad, or we're toast next crisis. It's not sexy, but it's smart. Common ground. Here's where they overlap. Nobody wants empty shelves or $10 eggs. Liberals want government to weave a safety net. Conservatives want it to get out of the way. Independents want it to do both halfway. Finland's no just lights the fuse. How we answer's up for grabs. Below is an expanded version of the reaction and commentary weighing the impact section for your script. Why did Finland just refuse to send eggs to the U.S.? The real story. I've stretched it to over 500 words while adhering to your outline's requirements, offering a critical but balanced take, posing a hypothetical scenario, discussing short and long-term effects economically, politically, socially, and focusing on logical reasoning over outrage. Here's the fleshed-out version. Let's react, commentary and opinions. Now let's break it down. Here's my take on what's really happening. Let's step back and weigh what Finland's rejection really means, not just for egg cartons on your grocery shelf, but for the bigger systems at play. This isn't a one-off trade spat. It's a stress test for how the U.S. handles food security, global reliance, and its own backyard policies. So, what's the fallout and where does it leave us? Let's reason through it. Picture this hypothetical. What if the U.S. faced a major food crisis tomorrow? Say the avian flu doubles its toll, wiping out another 35 million hens by fall. That's not a wild leap. We've lost that many already in 2025 per USDA numbers. Would our current patchwork of imports and struggling domestic farms hold up? Or would we be staring at $10 a dozen eggs and rationed breakfasts? Could we lean on Canada or Mexico to plug the gap, or would they pull a Finland and prioritize their own people? It's a scenario that forces us to ask, are we built to weather a storm, or are we one bad flu season from a full-blown scramble? In the short term, Finland's no isn't a game changer on its own. Their 4 million hens were never going to flood U.S. markets. But it's a domino. AgriWatch estimates egg prices could climb another 15% by summer if shortages deepen, especially with seasonal demand spiking. That's not just a hit to your wallet. Local bakeries already struggling with inflation are now scaling back production or charging customers extra just to break even. Restaurants hiking prices and low-income families swapping protein for cheaper carbs. Economically, the poultry industry is already bleeding $8 billion in losses this year, says the American Egg Board. Every rejection like this tightens the screws, pushing importers to scramble for pricier alternatives or haggle with less reliable suppliers. Politically, it's fuel for the fire. If Trump's tariff threats from his campaign trail linger in D.C.'s memory, expect louder calls for America First agriculture policies. Maybe even retaliatory trade moves that could backfire on other imports. Socially, it's tension at the checkout line, empty shelves breed frustration, and $6 eggs today could mean $8 tomorrow. Zoom out to the long term and the stakes get heavier. Economically, this could nudge the U.S. toward a reckoning with its food supply chain. We import about 5% of our eggs annually, a small slice. But when domestic production's down 10% since 2023, that sliver matters. Do we double down on rebuilding farms or keep betting on global partners who might not always say yes? Politically, it's a tug-of-war between globalists and nationalists. Biden's team might push for trade pacts to smooth these wrinkles, but a GOP-led Congress could counter with subsidies or deregulation to juice local output. Both sides risking overreach. Socially, it's about trust. If shortages pile up, faith in government and markets erodes. People start asking why a superpower can't keep eggs on the table. History backs this up. COVID supply chain chaos in 2020 sparked similar grumbling. And that was just toilet paper. Food hits harder. The balance here is tricky. Finland's refusal exposes cracks, our reliance on imports leaves us vulnerable, but going full isolationist ignores how interconnected food systems are. Data from the UN shows global trade cuts food costs 20% on average. Ditch that and prices soar even without a crisis. Yet the Farm Bureau's right too. Decades of regulatory creep and underinvestment have left U.S. farms fragile. Neither side's got a monopoly on truth. This isn't about outrage. It's about reasoning through trade-offs. Do we shore up at home and risk higher costs or lean on allies and risk more no's? One thing's clear, eggs are just the start. And here's the thing. This won't be the last time food shortages test America's resilience. Whether it's eggs, wheat, or even fresh water, how should we prepare for the next crisis? Below is an expanded version of the call to action and viewer engagement section for your left, right, and center script titled, Why Did Finland Just Refuse to Send Eggs to the U.S.? The Real Story. I've adhered to your outline structure, summarizing without forcing a conclusion, asking an open-ended question, and prompting likes/shares/subscriptions organically while stretching it to over 500 words. The expansion adds depth, encourages broader participation, and reinforces the show's ethos of balanced, civil discourse. Take action. Final thoughts and wrap up. So what does this all mean? Let's wrap it up with some final thoughts and what you can do next. All right, we've dug into Finland's egg export rejection from every angle, trade logistics, U.S. policy gaps, even whispers of geopolitical chess moves. But where does it leave us? Is this a flashing red light that America needs to overhaul its food security playbook, doubling down on homegrown production to shield against the next crisis? Or is it just a hiccup in the global trade system, a reminder that no one nation can or should go it alone? We've laid out the facts and perspectives, but there's no neat bow here. The answer's not black and white, and that's where you come in. This isn't just about eggs. It's about how we keep our shelves stocked, our prices sane, and our country steady when the unexpected hits. Finland's no could be a one-off, or it might be the first domino in a bigger shift. So what's your take? Should the U.S. pour resources into rebuilding its poultry industry? Think more farms, fewer regulations, and a push for self-reliance? Or is the smarter move to lean into global partnerships, negotiating better deals to keep food flowing across borders? Maybe you see a middle path, blending the two to dodge both isolation and dependence. Whatever's on your mind, we want to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what you'd do if you were calling the shots. Is this a wake-up call for Washington to act, or a sign that global trade still got our back? Don't hold back, but let's keep it respectful. This is about hashing out ideas, not throwing punches. And hey, if you've got a wild card angle we didn't cover, like say, climate's role in all this, or a tech fix like lab-grown eggs, bring it to the table. The best debates start with the unexpected. Let's take this beyond the screen too. Hit up the comment section and drop your stance with food security debate. We're not here to preach, we're here to spark real talk. If this breakdown got your gears turning, smash that like button. It tells us you're vibing with these deep dives. Share it with your crew, your family, anyone who's felt the pinch of $6 eggs lately. And if you're new here, subscribe to Left, Right, and Center. We tackle the messy stuff like this every week. No spin, just straight up analysis. Think about it. Food's not just fuel, it's economics, it's politics, it's survival. Finland's move might be a blip, or it might be a preview of tougher days ahead. Are we ready? Are we overreacting? You tell us. One last nudge. If you're sitting on a question this raised like, what's Canada or Mexico doing with their eggs? Fire it our way. We might just dig into it next. So jump in, keep the discussion alive, and let's figure this out together.